They shared this video with Fox 26, showing a man entering Clark's apartment. You can later see him running from her building. He stops, turns around, and goes back toward her apartment. Then he can be seen running back out and away from the scene.
I can't see nobody else but him. I don't know if I'm wrong or not, but that's all I see.
After not hearing from Clark, her family became worried, so they sent her brother to check on her. That's when he made the gruesome discovery. Clark had been shot multiple times and left to die.
In early April 2022, Dontia Clark, a 20-year-old woman from Houston, was found dead inside her own apartment after her brother, Jamal Clark, raised concerns when he could not reach her. Law enforcement confirmed the cause of death as multiple gunshot wounds. The entry point showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting the person who entered may have been known to her. Surveillance footage from the complex captured an unidentified figure entering and exiting the apartment around the time of the incident. At the time of her death, Dontia had just learned she was pregnant, a fact confirmed by her mother, Tasha Clark. Despite these details, police have not publicly named a suspect or issued charges. Investigators continue to classify the case as an active homicide and are seeking information from anyone with knowledge of the events. Key questions about who was involved, the motive, and the sequence of events remain unanswered. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now let's begin. Dontia Clark was a 20-year-old woman living in southwest Houston, Texas, at the time of her death in April 2022. She was identified by family members and law enforcement as a young adult who had recently begun establishing independence. Her death occurred inside her apartment, where she lived alone. At the time of her death, Clark was enrolled in college, pursuing her education with the intention of completing her studies and building a stable future. Family members stated that she had plans related to continued schooling and personal development. There was no indication that she intended to relocate or significantly alter her routine in the immediate future. According to relatives, Clark was socially active and maintained regular contact with people close to her. She was described as outgoing and communicative, often staying in touch with family members through phone calls and messages. Her personality was characterized as expressive and engaged, particularly with those in her immediate circle. Clark's daily routine followed a consistent pattern. She balanced school responsibilities with work and personal time. She was employed, which allowed her to maintain financial independence. Her income supported her living expenses, including rent at the apartment complex where she resided. There is no public indication that she was experiencing financial instability or housing insecurity. Her social circle consisted primarily of family members, friends, classmates, and acquaintances she interacted with regularly. There is no public record suggesting involvement in criminal activity or ongoing disputes. Her lifestyle appeared routine, structured, and predictable. Clark maintained frequent communication with her family. Family members reported that it was unusual for her to go long periods without responding to messages or calls. This pattern of communication would later become a critical factor in raising alarm after contact was lost. In the period shortly before her death, Clark learned that she was pregnant. The pregnancy was in its early stages. This development represented a significant change in her immediate future, potentially affecting her personal plans, responsibilities, and relationships. Family members stated that she had recently shared this information with select individuals. It is not publicly confirmed exactly who knew about the pregnancy beyond close family and possibly individuals within her personal life. The pregnancy introduced additional considerations into the investigation, as it raised questions regarding who was aware of it and how that knowledge may have influenced events. Law enforcement has not publicly confirmed whether the pregnancy was treated as a motive-related factor, but it remains a documented aspect of the case. In the days leading up to her death, Dontia Clark reportedly continued her normal activities. There were no publicly documented disruptions to her schedule. She attended to her responsibilities and maintained contact with family members and friends. Known communications in the days before the incident included phone calls and messages exchanged with relatives. These communications did not raise immediate concerns. No threats or warnings were reported by family members prior to her death. There were no confirmed reports of unusual behavior, significant changes in routine, or expressed fear. Family members stated that nothing in her conduct suggested imminent danger. She did not report being followed, threatened, or harassed based on publicly available information. Physically, there were no reports indicating illness or injury in the final week of her life. Her emotional state, as described by relatives, appeared consistent with someone continuing daily life responsibilities while processing a new pregnancy. There is no confirmed information indicating that Clark expressed concerns, fear, or expectations regarding potential conflict. There were no publicized disputes or confrontations reported in the days before the incident. The last confirmed contact with family occurred within a normal communication window. When attempts to reach her later went unanswered, concern began to grow. This lack of response was inconsistent with her established communication habits. The final known person Clark interacted with has not been publicly identified by law enforcement. Investigators have not released the identity of anyone last seen with her, nor have they confirmed whether the final interaction occurred in person or electronically. The shooting occurred during nighttime hours inside Clark's apartment. The estimated time frame has not been publicly specified in precise detail, but investigators believe the incident took place hours before her body was discovered. There is no confirmed list of individuals known to be inside the apartment that night. Law enforcement stated there were no signs of forced entry, which suggests that Clark either allowed someone inside voluntarily or that the individual had access to the apartment. Neighbors did not report hearing gunshots or disturbances during the time frame in question, or at least none were publicly documented. The absence of noise complaints or emergency calls contributed to the delayed discovery of the crime. The shooting occurred inside the apartment unit. Specific details regarding the exact room have not been fully disclosed publicly. Investigators confirmed that Clark sustained multiple gunshot wounds, indicating intentional and direct violence. The number of shots fired has not been officially detailed in public statements, but police confirmed that she was shot more than once. This detail suggests a deliberate act rather than an accidental discharge. The absence of forced entry was a key observation made at the scene. Doors and entry points did not show signs of damage. This finding narrowed investigative focus toward individuals familiar with Clark or known to her. There has been no public confirmation that valuables were taken from the apartment. Law enforcement has not classified the killing as a robbery, and there were no immediate indications of theft released to the public. Based on available information, Clark may have remained inside the apartment for several hours after being shot before being discovered. The lack of immediate response or emergency contact delayed medical intervention. The body was ultimately discovered after family members became concerned and went to check on her in person. Emergency responders were called, and the scene was secured for investigation.
Well, loved ones of a 20-year-old pregnant woman murdered in her apartment held a candlelight vigil in her honor.
And they also shared a video of a person who they believe could be the suspect, a person who entered and then ran from her apartment. Fox 26's Gabby Hart joining us from South Gessner and South Braeswood Boulevard, where this happened, bringing us details.
That's right. Family and friends gathered outside that young woman's apartment. They created a small makeshift memorial right at her doorstep. Tonight, her family telling us they believe they know exactly who took her life.
She was a young woman in a bunch.
The family of 20-year-old Dontia Clark says they still haven't fully processed the fact that she's really gone.
I don't truly want to believe she's gone. I still call her phone to this day. I still text her praying she's going to pick up, but I know she's not. It's just, she should be here.
Her sister says Clark found out she was 8 weeks pregnant the day before she was shot to death inside of her apartment.
She was excited, but she was also scared. I even told my sister it's okay to be scared. You know, it's your first child. It's okay. That's the last conversation I had with my sister.
Her family believes the father of her unborn child is responsible.
If you didn't want the child, you could have just left her alone.
They shared this video with Fox 26, showing a man entering Clark's apartment. You can later see him running from her building. He stops, turns around, and goes back toward her apartment. Then he can be seen running back out and away from the scene.
I can't see nobody else but him. I don't know if I'm wrong or not, but that's all I see.
After not hearing from Clark, her family became worried, so they sent her brother to check on her. That's when he made the gruesome discovery. Clark had been shot multiple times and left to die.
I'm just gonna miss my baby. I do not believe he took my baby away from me.
Clark's mother says there were no signs of forced entry, which leads them to believe that she knew the killer and felt comfortable enough to let them in.
She not gonna let anybody in her house that she don't know. You took my sister and you left her in the house by herself. That's not right. That's not right. And you're free.
And so far, no arrests have been made in connection with her murder, but the family has turned over that evidence to police. Anyone with information is asked to come forward, call police. Remember, you can call Crime Stoppers if you'd like to remain anonymous. For Fox 26 News, I'm Gabby Hart, reporting.
In the early hours of April 2022, concerns began to form among Dontia Clark's family after repeated attempts to contact her went unanswered. Phone calls were made throughout the morning with no response. Text messages showed no activity. This lack of communication stood out because Dontia was known to stay in regular contact with close relatives. As time passed, the silence became increasingly unusual. Family members reviewed their most recent interactions with her. There were no indications that she planned to travel or disconnect. She had not informed anyone that she would be unavailable. By late morning, the absence of contact shifted from inconvenience to concern. A decision was made to physically check on her at her apartment in southwest Houston. A family member traveled to the apartment complex where Dontia lived. Upon arrival, nothing appeared visibly disturbed from the outside. The door was intact, and there were no signs of forced entry. After gaining access to the apartment, the family member entered and discovered Dontia inside. She was unresponsive and had sustained gunshot wounds. Emergency services were contacted immediately. First responders arrived shortly after the call was placed. Emergency medical personnel assessed the situation and determined that Dontia Clark was deceased. Law enforcement officers secured the apartment and restricted access to the unit. The area was treated as a potential crime scene from that moment forward. Police conducted an initial walk through the apartment. Early observations indicated that the scene did not show signs of break-in. Doors and windows were intact. There was no immediate evidence of a struggle visible at entry points. The interior of the apartment was preserved to allow investigators to document the condition of the scene as it was found. Family members present at the scene were separated from the apartment area and spoken to briefly by officers. They provided basic information, including when Dontia was last heard from and any relevant details about her routine. At that point, investigators did not provide conclusions, only confirmation that a death investigation was underway. Law enforcement officially confirmed that Dontia Clark's death was being investigated as a homicide. The determination was based on visible gunshot wounds and the circumstances under which her body was found. Investigators began documenting the scene through photographs, measurements, and written reports. The preliminary cause of death was identified as multiple gunshot wounds. Medical personnel confirmed that the injuries were fatal. An autopsy was scheduled to establish exact details regarding the number of shots fired, trajectory, and timing. Early investigative conclusions focused on the absence of forced entry. Officers noted that entry points to the apartment did not appear damaged. This detail suggested that the individual responsible may have been known to the victim or allowed inside voluntarily. Investigators did not publicly confirm any theories, but acknowledged that this detail was significant. Within the first 48 hours, police released limited information to the public. They confirmed the victim's identity, age, and location where she was found. They stated that the investigation was ongoing and asked anyone with information to come forward. No suspect descriptions were released during this period. Several key details were withheld from public statements. Police did not disclose the exact timeline of the shooting, the type of firearm used, or whether there were signs of defensive wounds. Information regarding potential persons of interest was not shared. Investigators also did not confirm whether they believed the suspect was still in the area. The case was initially classified as an open homicide investigation. Detectives from the Homicide Division were assigned to the case. Evidence collection and witness canvassing began immediately following the scene processing. Investigators collected physical evidence from inside the apartment. This included shell casings, possible bullet fragments, and other materials relevant to the shooting. The location of each item was documented to help reconstruct the sequence of events. Any objects believed to have been touched or moved were examined for trace evidence. Firearm-related evidence was carefully logged. Ballistic considerations included determining the caliber of the weapon used and whether the shell casings matched any known firearms in law enforcement databases. The absence of firearm at the scene suggested it was removed after the shooting. Surveillance footage from the apartment complex became a key part of the investigation. Cameras positioned around the property captured portions of the exterior walkways and entry points. Investigators reviewed this footage to identify movements before and after the estimated time of death. In addition to footage obtained by law enforcement, the family independently secured surveillance video. This footage reportedly showed an unidentified individual entering and exiting the apartment during the time frame believed to be relevant to the shooting. The identity of the individual was not publicly confirmed. The video evidence helped investigators establish a possible timeline. Footage showed movement near the apartment during late night or early morning hours. The duration of the individual's presence inside the unit was noted. This information was used to narrow the window in which the shooting likely occurred. Despite the footage, the individual captured on camera was not clearly identifiable in publicly released images. Facial features were unclear and clothing details were limited. Investigators did not confirm whether the individual was considered a suspect or person of interest. Forensic testing played a central role in the case. Gunshot residue testing, fingerprint analysis, and DNA processing were conducted on collected evidence. Results of these tests were not fully disclosed to the public. Investigators stated that forensic analysis takes time and is often critical to building a case. Digital evidence was also examined. Investigators reviewed phone records, text messages, and social media activity to establish Dontia's communications prior to her death. This information was used to identify contacts and reconstruct her final hours. Details from this analysis were not released publicly. The confirmation that Dontia Clark was pregnant became one of the most significant contextual elements of the investigation. According to family members, Dontia had recently learned she was expecting a child. The pregnancy was still in its early stages, estimated at approximately 8 weeks. This timeline placed the discovery of the pregnancy very close to the date of her death, meaning the information had not yet become widely known. At the time, Dontia had not publicly announced the pregnancy. Family statements indicate that only a limited number of people were aware. This included close relatives and at least one individual connected to her personal life. The exact list of people who knew remains unclear, as investigators have not released an official breakdown of who was informed and when. The limited circulation of this information immediately narrowed the scope of relevance. In investigative terms, any major life development that is recent, private, and known to only a small group becomes a point of interest. This does not establish motive on its own, but it raises questions about timing, awareness, and potential reactions among those who knew. Family members stated that Dontia had only begun processing the pregnancy herself. There were no public reports of conflict or distress connected to the news. However, investigators typically assess whether such information could have altered relationship dynamics, expectations, or responsibilities among people in the victim's life. This assessment is standard procedure and does not imply wrongdoing. The pregnancy also introduced a legal dimension. In homicide investigations involving pregnant victims, authorities may evaluate whether the unborn child qualifies as an additional victim under applicable statutes. Whether this was formally considered in Dontia Clark's case has not been publicly confirmed. No charging decisions were announced, making it unclear whether prosecutors evaluated the pregnancy as a factor in potential charges or enhancements. Investigators have not disclosed whether pregnancy-related leads were pursued in depth. There's been no public confirmation regarding interviews focused specifically on who knew about the pregnancy, how they responded, or whether any disputes arose after the information was shared. This absence of detail has left a significant gap in public understanding of how central the pregnancy was to the direction of the investigation. What remains clear is that the pregnancy was verified, recent, and not widely known. Beyond that, official silence has left its investigative relevance largely undefined. In criminal investigations, the term person of interest is often misunderstood. It does not mean a suspect, nor does it imply guilt. A person of interest is an individual whose connection to the case warrants further examination due to proximity, access, relationship, or relevant information. Law enforcement may question a person of interest without publicly identifying them, and many are never charged. In the case of Dontia Clark, police have not publicly named any persons of interest. This does not indicate that no such individuals exist, only that none have been formally disclosed. The absence of forced entry into the apartment suggests that the person who entered either had access or was allowed inside. This detail naturally directs investigative focus toward individuals within Dontia's social and personal circle. People close to Dontia at the time of her death would have included family members, friends, acquaintances, and individuals with whom she had ongoing personal relationships. Investigators would typically examine recent communications, share plans, unresolved disputes, and any changes in behavior among these individuals in the days leading up to the homicide. Relationship dynamics are a standard area of inquiry. This includes romantic relationships, past or present, as well as friendships and household interactions. Investigators often review phone records, text messages, social media activity, and in-person contact logs to establish timelines and identify inconsistencies. Law enforcement has not disclosed who was questioned, when those interviews occurred, or how many individuals were interviewed. It is also unknown whether any interviews led to follow-up questioning or secondary lines of inquiry. No interrogation transcripts or summaries have been released. Equally important is who has never been publicly named. Without transparency, it is impossible for the public to know whether key individuals were ruled out early, remain under scrutiny, or were never fully examined. This lack of information has prevented external evaluation of investigative thoroughness. There's been no confirmation of whether anyone refused to cooperate, requested legal counsel, or declined interviews. These details, while often withheld during active investigations, become increasingly relevant as time passes without resolution. As of now, the identities, roles, and statuses of any persons of interest remain unknown to the public. One of the most significant challenges in the Dontia Clark case has been a lack of sustained public updates. After initial reports confirming the homicide, official communication became minimal. No regular briefings, progress reports, or clarifications have been released to explain investigative direction or setbacks. There have been no arrests or charges announced. This suggests that investigators either lack sufficient evidence to meet prosecutorial standards or that leads have not produced actionable results. In either scenario, the absence of legal movement has stalled public accountability. Another major obstacle is the limited release of evidence. While surveillance footage was acknowledged, the full scope of available video has not been made public. Forensic findings, including ballistic analysis, have not been disclosed. Without these details, the public cannot assess the strength or weakness of the evidence. Investigative stagnation can occur for several reasons. These include insufficient physical evidence, lack of eyewitness cooperation, inconclusive forensic results, or conflicting accounts from individuals involved. It can also result from prioritization challenges within law enforcement agencies, handling multiple cases simultaneously. Silence from potential witnesses is another common barrier. Individuals may fear retaliation, legal consequences, or personal involvement. In cases where the victim knew the perpetrator, witnesses may be reluctant to provide information that implicates someone within their community or social circle. Jurisdictional and procedural factors can also slow progress. Evidence processing delays, interdepartmental coordination issues, or prosecutorial review timelines may all contribute to extended inactivity. None of these factors have been officially cited in this case, leaving their relevance uncertain. Ultimately, the investigation remains open but largely opaque. The absence of arrests, named persons of interest, or detailed updates continues to limit public understanding of what has been done, what remains unresolved, and what barriers prevent the case from moving forward. After the homicide investigation entered its initial phase, the responsibility of maintaining public awareness gradually shifted from authorities to Dontia Clark's family. With limited updates coming from law enforcement, family members began making direct appeals for information. These appeals were directed both to the public and anyone who may have been present in or around the apartment complex on the night of the shooting. The family emphasized the importance of even minor details, repeatedly stating that small observations could contribute to identifying the individual responsible. Public vigils and remembrance gatherings were organized as part of these efforts. These events were held at locations connected to Dontia Clark's life, including areas near the apartment complex and community spaces familiar to her family. While these gatherings served as memorials, they also functioned as public reminders that the case remained unresolved. Attendees were encouraged to share information privately with authorities rather than publicly speculate, reinforcing the family's intent to support the investigation rather than interfere with it. One of the most notable actions taken by the family was the independent release of surveillance footage. Video captured from cameras in and around the apartment complex reportedly showed an unidentified individual entering and exiting the apartment during the time frame when the shooting is believed to have occurred. The family made the decision to share this footage publicly after determining that it had not led to an arrest through official investigative channels. Their objective was to widen exposure and prompt recognition from someone who might identify the individual shown. Alongside sharing footage, the family consistently called for accountability and justice. These calls were made through public statements, community outreach, and media interviews. The messaging remained consistent. The case was active, the evidence existed, and progress was expected. Family members avoided naming suspects publicly, instead emphasizing cooperation with law enforcement and urging transparency where possible. As time passed, frustrations with the pace of the investigation became more pronounced. Despite repeated follow-ups, the family received limited information regarding developments, evidence processing, or suspect identification. They expressed concerns about prolonged silence and the lack of visible progress, particularly given the presence of surveillance footage and the clear circumstances surrounding the crime scene, including the absence of forced entry. To prevent the case from being forgotten, the family continued to keep it visible through anniversaries, social media posts, and repeated appeals. They maintained contact with community organizers and journalists, ensuring that Dontia Clark's name remained connected to an active, unresolved investigation. Their actions effectively extended the lifespan of public awareness beyond the initial news cycle. The case initially received local media coverage shortly after the homicide. Reports focused on the basic facts: a young woman found shot inside her apartment, confirmation of pregnancy, and the lack of forced entry. Early coverage included statements from law enforcement and brief comments from family members. During this phase, the story appeared across multiple local outlets, often accompanied by requests for public assistance. However, as weeks passed without a suspect announcement or arrest, coverage diminished. The absence of new official updates reduced the case's news value in standard reporting cycles. As a result, Dontia Clark's case gradually disappeared from headlines, replaced by newer incidents and developing stories. This decline occurred despite the investigation remaining open. When compared to other similar cases, the pattern was consistent with a broader trend in local crime reporting. Homicides without immediate suspects often receive limited long-term coverage unless new evidence emerges or public pressure escalates. In contrast, cases involving arrests, trials, or official press conferences tend to maintain media attention for longer periods. This disparity contributed to reduced visibility for Clark's case over time. Public response during the initial reporting phase included expressions of concern and calls for justice within the local community. Neighbors questioned how a fatal shooting could occur without witnesses or reports of disturbance. Online discussions emerged, focusing on the surveillance footage and the implications of no forced entry. These discussions, however, were largely informal and speculative, lacking confirmed information. As coverage declined, online platforms became the primary space where the case continued to be discussed. Posts sharing surveillance footage circulated periodically, often resurfacing during anniversaries or after unrelated violent incidents in the area. Despite this, online attention did not translate into official updates or public breakthroughs, leaving many questions unresolved. Several critical questions remain unanswered and continue to define the case. One of the most significant concerns is the identity of the individual who entered the apartment on the night of the shooting. Surveillance footage indicates movement consistent with a visitor, yet no public identification has been confirmed. It remains unclear whether this individual was questioned, ruled out, or remains under investigation. Another unresolved issue is the absence of forced entry. Investigators noted that there were no signs of a break-in, which suggests that the shooter either had access to the apartment or was voluntarily allowed inside. This detail raises questions about the victim's relationship with the individual involved, though no official statements have clarified this aspect. The question of familiarity between the shooter and the victim remains open. Without forced entry and without evidence of a robbery, investigators have not publicly confirmed whether crime was targeted or opportunistic. Determining whether the shooter was known to Dontia Clark is central to understanding motive, yet this information has not been released. The lack of arrests also remains unexplained. Despite the presence of video footage, physical evidence, and a defined timeline, no suspect has been publicly named. It is unknown whether this is due to insufficient evidence, uncooperative witnesses, or unresolved forensic analysis. There is also uncertainty regarding unreleased evidence. Law enforcement has not clarified whether additional surveillance footage, forensic results, or witness statements exist that have not been made public. This lack of transparency has contributed to speculation, but has not resulted in concrete leads. Finally, the broader issue of what prevented the case from moving forward remains unanswered. Whether the investigation stalled due to procedural limitations, resource constraints, or evidentiary challenges has not been disclosed. As a result, the case remains open, defined by confirmed facts, but shaped equally by what has not been explained. As of the most recent publicly available information, the homicide of Dontia Clark remains classified as an open and active investigation. Law enforcement authorities have not announced the closure of the case, nor have they indicated that it has been suspended or cold. The designation of open means investigators technically retain the authority to pursue leads, re-examine evidence, and conduct follow-up interviews if new information emerges. However, despite this classification, there have been no substantial public developments signaling measurable progress. No confirmed suspect has been publicly named in connection with the killing. Law enforcement has not released the identity of any individual as a suspect, nor have they officially confirmed the designation of any person of interest. While investigators are not required to disclose suspect information during an ongoing case, the absence of any named individual years after the homicide highlights the limited transparency surrounding the investigation. To date, no charges have been filed, no arrests have been announced, no warrants publicly acknowledged, and no individuals have been brought before a court in connection with the crime. The lack of charges suggests that prosecutors have not been presented with evidence they consider sufficient to meet the legal threshold required to proceed. This does not necessarily indicate a lack of evidence overall, but rather an absence of evidence that can be directly tied to a specific individual beyond reasonable doubt. Authorities continue to issue an ongoing request for public assistance. This request typically includes appeals for information related to the victim's final movements, individuals seen near the apartment, or knowledge of personal relationships that may be relevant. These appeals imply that investigators believe at least some critical information may exist outside of what law enforcement has been able to independently obtain. The continued reliance on public tips underscores the possibility that witnesses have not yet come forward or that individuals with relevant knowledge remain unidentified. A significant amount of time has elapsed since the homicide, with years passing without a resolution. In criminal investigations, the passage of time often complicates evidence analysis. Physical evidence may degrade, surveillance footage may be lost or overwritten, and memories of witnesses may fade. The longer a case remains unresolved, the more difficult it can become to reconstruct events with precision. Despite this, the case's open status indicates that it has not been formally abandoned. Several facts in the case of Dontia Clark have been consistently confirmed and remain undisputed. She was found deceased inside her apartment after sustaining multiple gunshot wounds. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting the shooter entered voluntarily or was known to the victim. The discovery of her body occurred after family members became concerned due to a lack of communication. Law enforcement confirmed the death as a homicide shortly after arriving at the scene. Additionally, it has been confirmed that Dontia Clark was pregnant at the time of her death. This fact was known to family members and acknowledged publicly during the early stages of the investigation. Surveillance footage exists from the apartment complex, and family members have stated that video evidence shows an unidentified individual entering and leaving the apartment around the time of the incident. These elements form the core factual foundation of the case. What is known includes the location of the crime, the manner of death, and the absence of forced entry. It is also known that investigators collected evidence, reviewed surveillance footage, and conducted interviews. The case has not been closed, and law enforcement continues to accept tips. What remains unknown is substantial. The identity of the person who entered the apartment has not been publicly confirmed. The motive behind the killing has not been officially stated. It is unclear which leads were pursued extensively and which were ruled out. The content and conclusions of forensic testing have not been disclosed. Additionally, it is unknown whether investigators have a suspect privately identified but lack sufficient evidence to proceed. The distinction between confirmed facts and unanswered questions is critical. While speculation often fills gaps in unresolved cases, the absence of verified conclusions means that many aspects of the crime remain undetermined. This separation ensures clarity and prevents assumptions from replacing documented information. Despite the passage of time, the homicide of Dontia Clark remains unresolved. An open case without arrests or charges reflects the limits of available evidence or cooperation. It also highlights the challenges investigators face when crimes occur without witnesses willing to come forward or without direct physical evidence linking a suspect to the act. Unresolved cases often persist quietly within law enforcement systems, resurfacing only when new information is received. In this case, the lack of public updates does not necessarily indicate an activity, but it does signal that no breakthrough significant enough to advance the case through the judicial process has occurred. Accountability remains a central issue in the case. Accountability does not solely refer to identifying and prosecuting a suspect, but also to maintaining investigative diligence and transparency within reasonable legal limits. It involves ensuring that evidence is preserved, leads are followed, and the case is not allowed to disappear due to time or shifting priorities. Public accountability also plays a role. When cases remain unsolved, public attention can influence whether new information is brought forward. Awareness keeps the case visible and reinforces the expectation that unresolved homicides warrant continued attention. As it stands, justice in the case of Dontia Clark remains pending. No individual has been legally held responsible, and the circumstances surrounding her death have not been fully explained. The case exists in a state of suspension, officially open, yet without resolution. Until new evidence emerges or a suspect is identified and charged, the homicide remains an unanswered entry in the criminal justice system. The outcome of the investigation depends on future developments, cooperation, and the possibility that information not yet known will eventually surface. For now, the case remains unresolved, with final answers still outstanding and accountability yet to be determined. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.